Did you know that less than 100 years ago, African men, women, and children were locked in cages, paraded in zoos across Europe? Not animals, humans, exhibited like curiosities, laughed at like clowns, studied like lab specimens. This is not fiction. It happened in Paris, in Berlin, in Brussels, across the so-called civilized world, and they called it entertainment. The year was 1889. The Eiffel Tower had just been unveiled, and at its feet, a twisted spectacle drew millions. The Exposition Universelle, a world fair celebrating colonial conquest. 11 African villages were reconstructed, with real Africans brought in to play their roles. They cooked, danced, bathed, and wept under the gaze of the white public. Some of them were chained, some were sick, some would die before the fair ended, but none of them were free. They were chosen for their skin, their language, their scars, their primitive look, to feed the myth that Europe had a duty to civilize them, to justify empire. Children stared through the bars, mothers pointed and laughed, scholars scribbled notes. No one asked the Africans their names, but there was one name they never forgot: Untold. He was a young Congolese man, brought to the Bronx Zoo in New York in 1906. He was brought, not to visit, but to live, in a cage, next to the monkeys. The sign read, Pygmy, age 23, height 4 feet 11 inches, weight 103 pounds. Visitors gawked, threw peanuts, laughed at his teeth, sharpened in the traditional way, and watched as he tried to hide his face. Day after day, the zoo director defended it, said it was science, said it was culture, but the humiliation broke him. Years later, Untold found a gun and shot himself. The bullet silenced his pain, but not the shame of those who put him there. You see, the human zoos weren't just bizarre sideshows. They were political tools to say, this is why we colonize, this is why we must rule them, this is why they are less. And it worked. Postcards were sold, photographs printed. School children were taught that Africa was savage and needed saving. The damage was deep, the lie long-lasting. But the truth never fully vanished. There were voices who resisted: black intellectuals, African leaders, anti-colonial fighters. They saw through the display, they demanded dignity, and slowly, the zoos shut down. But the images remain, locked in archives, hidden in museums, avoided in textbooks, because to remember them is to confront the truth. That colonialism wasn't just about land, it was about minds, about turning humans into objects, and calling it progress. Today, the cages are gone, but the echoes remain, in how Africa is still portrayed, in how black bodies are still exoticized, in how history is still taught. And so we ask, where are the memorials? Where is the justice? Where is the apology? There are statues of kings who funded these zoos, but none for those who suffered in them. Not even a plaque. But stories live, and we must tell them, because forgetting is easy, and repeating, far too possible. So remember the names we never knew, the eyes that watched from behind bars, the children who never saw home again. African human zoos were real, and they weren't long ago. They were yesterday, and unless we speak, they could be tomorrow. Subscribe to hear more stories like this. Share this, say their names, and never, ever forget.